The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on October 10th, 2023.
It's time now for Business Matters, brought to you by Mokulele Airlines. Now here's your host, Pam Tumpop. Good morning, Pam.
Hey, good morning, Gary. How are you?
I am doing well.
It looks like a gorgeous day from Pukalani. How's everything in Wailuku?
It's nice, yeah, nice and clear. Had a beautiful sunset this morning.
Oh, very good. You had a good weekend?
Not sunset, sunrise, I'm sorry.
Yeah, then we'd be ending our day pretty quickly.
Yes.
Thank you so much for all you do. We want to welcome everybody to Business Matters, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines. I'm your host, Pamela Timpop, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And today we're going to talk with economist Paul Brewbaker about the current health on Maui's economy and the effects of the wildfires and what that will mean moving forward. We're also going to speak with Debbie Cabebe. She is the CEO of MEO. And we will get to hear all about the different programs and assistance they are offering to the victims of the Lahaina and Kula fires. But let's get right into it. I want to introduce Paul Brewbaker. You know him if you listen to the show. He's been on before, and we love having him on. He is the principal of TZ Economics, a Hawaii economics consultancy. His background in research on the regional economy and financial risk analysis stems from 25 years as a Hawaii commercial bank economist and executive. He is a graduate of Stanford University, did graduate work at the University of Wisconsin, and received his PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii. He has lectured extensively over several decades in economic theory and applied courses at Wisconsin and Hawaii campuses. He is also a member of the American Economic Association, the American Finance Association, and the National Association for Business Economics, from which he holds the Certified Business Economist designation. So aloha and good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Pam.
So good to have you on. We always enjoy your take on what is going on Maui, and with all that we've been going through, where do you see the current state and health of Maui's overall economy at this time?
It's a tough moment in Maui's pandemic economic recovery because that was still, taking shape, slowly coming back. Maui and Hawaii as a state have fallen short of the pre-pandemic trends by a substantial amount. So it was already a long haul. And then, of course, the West Maui wildfire catastrophe complicates it even further. But, you got to do what you got to do. We'll just have to build back. But it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah. We're looking at this and just realizing that I think we have no idea how long that haul is going to be, and we look at other examples and we find that 5 years later, like Paradise, they're still working on that. How will Hawaii's overall economy, particularly the visitor industry, be impacted in the short and long term? We're starting to see the visitors come back. The governor announced October 8th. The mayor has done a staggered reopening for West Maui for, as we move forward, kind of watching the trends. But how do you think this is really going to impact us with this sort of rolling start?
Well, it is important to remember that it is a rolling start. I mean, it's not a light switch. And really the so-called reopening this week is more of the initiation of a process of reopening, property by property, area by area, as conditions warrant. And those will change over time. So anybody who was thinking that a deluge would somehow disrupt the recovery itself was, not thinking through the details. It's going to be a slow workout. In terms of quantitative magnitudes, Maui's about 11% of the state's economy. and tourism is about a third of Maui's economy. There are bigger numbers out there, but they're bogus numbers. And I've written something to the Maui Chamber which has links to new resources that have been published to clarify this severe overdose of misinformation about Maui's economy that followed the wildfire, and I think really complicated interpretation of the situation. Not to mention the Chinese internet trolls that it's been documented have been using the Maui wildfires as yet another opportunity to spread disinformation through social media. So forget everything you've heard. Tourism is about 1/3 of Maui's economy, period. And you can look it up now in a new report on EBED's website. I'm using a narrower measure than they use. I'm using the direct and indirect effects of tourism. But call it a third. Half of tourism on Maui is essentially West Maui. So call it a sixth. 1/6 of Maui's economy has shut down, essentially, as was the case from March through the middle of October in 2020, when we were in the travel quarantine period prior to the initiation of pre-flight PCR testing protocols that allowed screening of travelers coming to Maui and coming to Hawaii. So 1/6 of the economy. And in terms of employment, it's even larger because, again, like a big rock being thrown in a pond, this shock radiates outward from the epicenter of the catastrophe to affect the rest of Maui's economy and the state as a whole, and I'll get there in a second. But I think it's really important to note that my calculation right now is that 1 out of 4 people on Maui who were employed at the beginning of this summer are not employed now. That's 20,000 out of 80,000 persons. So this is a huge negative, adverse, shock to Maui's economy and should not be underestimated. And with respect, people who think that we should be focused primarily on grief should balance those concerns with the realization that 1 out of 4 people does not have an income on Maui. And that has other impacts. So getting recovery mobilized is really important. For the state as a whole, it boils down to maybe 2 percentage points of GDP at the moment. But lest anybody think that that's small, 2% of Hawaii GDP would be 6 agricultures. And people love to talk about agriculture.
We do love to talk about agriculture on Maui.
So imagine 6 agricultures disappeared.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a tremendous impact. I think that's interesting, and I appreciate that you sharing the 1 in 4. One of the things that we've been trying to say, and we saw this during COVID, which was that the World Health Organization and the International Monetary Fund, global organizations that are dealing with disasters, always said, when COVID hit, you have to deal with the economic and the humanitarian and health crisis in concert. You have to deal both at the same time.
Really important observation. You can't do one without the other. And my concern right now is, and I mean, no offense to anybody in particular, but the social media space especially is just dominated, overwhelmed by what I call performative emotional intelligence exhibition, like conspicuous display of people's feelings. And there's 20,000 people without a job. So, balance the concerns is what I'm saying. And remember that people have to work to feed their children. So there we go.
Well, and I appreciate that because it's really a hardship that businesses, who, of course, different industries who've rallied to also run to the support and aid of others are saying we're seeing a landslide now too, and we know that we haven't experienced the same level of devastation and harm and distress that others have. But if we don't bring back our economy, we're just going to continue to see a downward spiral. And so it's been a very challenging time.
Yeah, I mean, it would be bad enough, just to have the worst wildfire in American history.
Right.
But the fact that it occurred 3 years after a pandemic shutdown of the economy makes it even more challenging, because during the first year or two, from March 2020 through March 2021, and then with the tail of about 6 to 12 months after that, federal fiscal stimuli, liquidity being provided to businesses as well as directly to households, $5 trillion in stimuli, bridged the economic chasm that the pandemic, the need to shelter in place initially, the hesitant and tentative and uneven recovery once vaccination became available. That bridge allowed a lot of households and a lot of businesses to continue to, stay around and feed themselves and pay the rent while the economy was rebuilt.
Yeah.
Now, even without the wildfire, all that support has dissipated, and we're getting to see a truer picture of survivorship, right? Some, no offense to anybody, but some zombie businesses, right, the living dead, were survived longer than they would have under normal circumstances. And so that was going to happen anyway, but of course, as I say, the wildfire severely complicates that moment in the recovery where the true survivorship is being, is being revealed, and right. Where a lot of businesses that made it through the worst of the pandemic, but were made vulnerable to structural changes that have occurred as a result of the pandemic, now have to face this consequence of the wildfire, the displacement, the tragic loss of life, and the emotional toll on families and loved ones, and just people in the community.
Yeah, and one of the things we have done such a great job of leveraging the visitor industry and the trickle-down effect on that industry with all the businesses that we've been built around it, was restaurant and retail, but activities and events and sporting events, of course, we just lost a big one. So many things that we've done and really leveraged that. So we're seeing this amazing trickle-down effect, and so many businesses who are impacted still have loans, idle loans from the first, from our first challenge with COVID, and they're saying we can't take on any more loans. We don't need more debt. And even the SBA is having a hard time giving the loans out because they're saying we don't see an ability for you to repay at this time. So we're really in this terrible point where we're seeing a large trickle-down effect from the visitors not coming right now, and seeing so many businesses look to close. And helping people understand COVID was a national event, and so a lot of the programs that were released during COVID, like PPP and some of the other programs, shuttered venues and all that, is not coming down this time.
That's exactly right. In terms of, you talked about lending a second ago, this couldn't have happened at a worse time in terms of monetary policy, because in addition to the fiscal stimuli that Congress made available to households and businesses during the pandemic, monetary policy took an extreme accommodative position with the really, really low interest rates that allowed a lot of people to reset their debt, their mortgage debt. People could refi and whatnot. But today, we're at the tail end of the opposite in terms of monetary policy. The Federal Reserve has concluded or is approaching the conclusion of a complete reversal of that accommodative monetary policy, and the tightening has raised in tightening monetary policy, the overnight interbank lending rate has risen to 5.5%. The yield on the 10-year Treasury note, which is a benchmark for the long-term risk-free rate of interest, has pushed over 4.5%. And there are other special factors that are adding to the term premium or the credit risk premium, in addition to much less accommodative lending posture, an increase in the numbers of commercial bank lending officers who indicate that they have tightened credit conditions. So it's a very difficult moment because in addition to the support, fiscal and monetary policy support, which, as you say, was a national economic policy posture in the face of a national crisis, this local economic crisis neither has those sources of support nor has the generally favorable posture of lending institutions and credit markets more generally that existed at that time. So it's a tough time.
Yeah. And on top of that, as we've talked about before, we also had a housing crisis. So add to that, the fact that we still have a huge shortage of units. I think now they're saying maybe 12,000, but the number is debatable. Of course, we can add a lot more to that with the lost homes. And we're looking to build at a time when interest rates are much higher than they were before.
I am afraid that the interest rate environment alone is going to be a serious complication to not just the cost of building, because, capital for construction itself is more expensive. The materials cost, by the way, the building materials costs, which had inflated tremendously during the post-pandemic global supply chain breakdown, that part of the problem has dissipated somewhat. Those supply chains have been restored or are approaching the point where their restoration is complete. So many of those materials prices have settled to something that's more reasonable, if not exactly affordable. But the financing costs are going to be higher. And then I think ultimately the greatest challenge is that Maui County couldn't accommodate home building under normal circumstances. Mm-hmm. I am not optimistic about its ability to facilitate home building in the wake of the wildfire. I don't. The skill set doesn't exist anymore. I'm reminded my brother is an engineer. Spent most of his career in aerospace and mostly satellites for 20, 30 years with Lockheed and Martin Marietta and whatnot back in those days. But most recently he worked for SpaceX. Oh. And about 10 years ago he started working with Elon Musk's company and SpaceX, as he described it, SpaceX is NASA's NASA.
That's right.
So he gets there, and he's in his 50s at this time, and late 40s, early 50s. So he's, it's a senior kind of seasoned aerospace engineer. And he gets there, and it's all these kids. It's all these 20-year-old kids, right? They're new Stanford engineering degrees. And he realized that for 30 years in this country, nobody had built a rocket. Mm-hmm. And nobody knew how to build a rocket.
Yeah.
And so Elon Musk essentially started from scratch. Well, kind of the same thing confronts Maui at this time, because once upon a time, Maui built, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 housing units per year on the island. So the idea that you had to replace 20,000 housing units, no problem. That's like to do that in 2 or 3 years or 3 or 4 years. But that's not the world we live in now. And I could maybe I should go look it up so I know what I'm talking about. But we're not talking about thousands of units a year. new housing units per year in Maui's recent history, if you go back over the last decade or two. And so even like physically gearing up to build in larger numbers, even if the cost of capital wasn't higher, which it is, was going to be a challenge. But that's not the actual stumbling block for Maui County. The stumbling block is the process by which the entitlement to build, by which the right, but not the obligation, right, the optionality, the process by which the allocation of entitlement to build is I'm getting mixed up. The allocation process itself is all jam up. It's the only I'm trying to speak English, but it's all jam up, right? That's the problem.
Yeah, we need an overhaul.
All plug up. That thing all plug up. So, do people even know how to process 1,000 or 2,000 permits a year?
Yeah.
For the next 5
I think
years?
we need The Rock, Oprah, and Elon Musk. I think what we need is we need a new dream team to unlock this.
Bless their hearts, everybody on their Twitter feed or whatever it's called this week, their support is appreciated. But honestly, I think we need less celebrity participation and more bandwidth for new development.
Absolutely. Local
we're talking about a county where, check this out, the number of hotel rooms, condos, and timeshares on Maui has been declining for 30 years. And yet, this county thought it was a good idea to have a moratorium on hotel construction. What is going on? So, that's going to be a real test. That's like we're talking about a 180-degree turn in policy, in planning and development policy. We're talking about an elephant doing a pirouette in planning and development policy on Maui in the wake of this catastrophe. I'm not optimistic.
I hear you, and I will say this. I've seen solutions. I know we have solutions where we could do some things pretty expeditiously. So it's really going to come down to the land and the policy.
We'll see. The governor had embraced a dramatic,
proclamation.
Some people would say subversive set of home building and development policies in a 2-month-long emergency proclamation, and then he reneged on it. Like he basically said, no, we're not going to do that. So I think that a reality check of sorts should be taken from the experience on Kauai after Hurricane Iniki. Mm-hmm. It took about 3 to 5 years for tourism to recover. The rebuilding happened very quickly because essentially you could, the county set up a process there that said, if you're going to rebuild your house, knock yourself out. There's already a house, or there was already a house, so go build another house.
Just give them rain.
But by many measures, the most pessimistic assessment I've seen is a paper by McKenna Kaufman at UH and Elon Noy, a former UH professor. Not because they're pessimistic people, but I think maybe a more sober assessment in this case was that Kauai's economy writ large took about 18 years to recover. So now some of us think that that's the way they measured that was too extreme. But okay, we're talking years, if not decades, and I'm pretty sure we're talking about the remainder of this decade. Yeah. And so the trick is going to be able to create the bandwidth, and I'm using the same expression I've used every time we've talked about this on this radio show. Increase the bandwidth, increase the guardrails, right? Increase the bandwidth, make the guardrails more transparent, and let people through the door to rebuild and to build Maui and West Maui's future. And it's not going to be the same as it was before.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. I know you compiled some great statistics for us. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you put together that helps us look at the status of the economy now, as well as future projections, as we're looking to increase that bandwidth and capacity.
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I wrote something in response to your questions, but I do have, I think, if you want to spend a moment just thinking about the housing statistics, I mean, we can look at those. I think I have them right here in front of me somewhere. This Maui, that's Hawaii Island, Neighbor Island. I don't have Maui. Oh, there's Maui. So let's put it this way. Maui used to build in the early 1970s about 2,500 housing units per year. Maui today builds about 1/4 of that. And that's been true for the last decade. In fact, there's no decade that's had less home building on Maui than the last decade since the 1960s. And the population was declining on Maui in the early 1960s. The population had declined from about the 1930s to the mid to late 1960s. So it's been done before, is my point, but that was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's not like again, we talked about light switches earlier with respect to the tourism reopening. It's not like, the highly qualified professionals at the building department in Maui County have the ability to do 4 times as much work as they have been doing on a regular basis, on a routine basis for the last 10 years. And it's not as if the county itself wasn't facing the same labor shortage that everybody else, right? I think there's hundreds of vacant positions in Maui County, and there were before the pandemic, before the wildfire. So this is going to be a challenge in many, many dimensions. And I fully expect that leadership extant at the county and that leadership which will emerge. I have no doubt that this will bring new leadership to the fore in Maui County, some, bright and imaginative and maybe young minds that are looking at things in a new light and thinking about the next 200 years instead of maybe quite so much of the last 200. But something is going to have to break open for the recovery I'm talking about to be completed in the 2020s.
Yeah. Well, I remember the days of, when we would bring in Jim Dater, and he would take us way out there.
Are we running out of time on this show? I have a Jim Dater story. I'll try to keep it a short version. Jim Dater and I were on a panel. He's the famous futurist at University of Hawaii, right? Jim Dater and I were on a panel about the future of Hawaii. And this was over at UH, actually. And I was giving my usual blah, blah, blah economist stuff. And then Jim Dater gets up and he goes, "Oh, you economists with your little, the living in the land of the econs or whatever." And he proceeded to paint this picture of a Hawaii of the future where we would all be living in these village clusters around the island. And I thought, wow, this guy is nuts. And now, post-pandemic, as I observed in the data, that 25% of workers in Hawaii today either work from home full-time or hybrid or, several days a week. I'm starting to think about Jim Dater again. Because what he could see that I couldn't was that the technology allows for a distributed workforce.
Right.
We don't have to have the same workplaces. And people should be thinking about this very seriously in the aftermath of the wildfire. Particularly, it's persons with higher educational attainment, persons with more technological skills and STEM skills and whatnot, people with higher incomes, those are the ones that are able to work remotely. And to be sure, people in customer-facing occupations and industries and tourism-related businesses where you're interacting with the customer, understandably, people have to be in the workplace. But there's an opportunity here in the wake of the simultaneous global unplanned experiment in remote working and working from home that has shown that it's successful in some areas under some conditions and much more than we thought was feasible pre-pandemic, I think people should be thinking about that as we redesign and rebuild not just West Maui, but the structure of Maui's economy in general.
I agree. You know, as we're starting to see an uptick now, and we're seeing them, more visitors coming to Maui, and I know right now not as much by air but by sea. How complex is the forecast for our future as we look at the visitor industry moving forward, given the wildfire situation, but also, when we saw this during COVID, the messaging that's going out, where we have a local outcry saying, telling visitors, please don't come, this isn't the right time.
That's not helpful, right? So my analogy is, Wailea is the same distance from Lahaina as Waikiki is from Nanakuli. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying, if Nanakuli had a wildfire, you wouldn't get up on your social media and say, don't go to Waikiki, would you?
Right.
I mean, I don't understand that. So that was not helpful. But let's forget about social media. Let's think about the more important question you asked, which has to do with the economic forecast. And I know people are trying to plan, and things suddenly change, and it's very difficult. A lot of moving parts, a lot of uncertainty. Unfortunately, that will persist. But I can tell you, there are already now, as of just the last couple of weeks, two really good, first cut forecasts at the post-wildfire economic outlook. One is posted at DBED at their usual site. So, DBED has a quarterly forecast that they post. And the other is the public version of the UHERO forecast. So you can just go to DBED, DBEDT, right, dbed.hawaii.gov, and go find their economic stuff. And go to uhero.hawaii.edu and go find their forecast. There's a public version available, and I'm sure they'd appreciate your subscription if you want to get, the good stuff. In addition, this Friday of this week, the Friday the 13th, the Hawaii Economic Association is going to be having its annual economic conference, at which is featured at the end of the conference day the annual economic forecast panel discussion. And we'll all be there, the DBED guys, the UHERO guys, and I'm going to be there.
I'll be there. So we're a sponsor.
And thank you very much, by the way.
Maui Chamber.
And Hawaii Economic Association.com. Hawaii Economic Association, all one word, .com. You can register virtually for this conference, so you can participate from Maui. Go to their website. There's a link there. It's a pretty good deal. It's a really interesting program in the morning. Former Hawaii Governor John Waihee is one of the opening panelists in a discussion of why don't things ever change in Hawaii. And at noon, Governor Josh Green is going to be speaking about the impact of the wildfire and aspects of the economic outlook. So register virtually at HawaiiEconomicAssociation.com for that conference and forecast discussion in the late afternoon. You don't have to sit through the whole thing, but catch the forecast. I think it's 2 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah, it is sold out, so you can still register virtually. So
it's not sold out virtually. Correct.
Yeah, not virtually.
Save the plane fare. Go down to the beach with your iPhone and a pair of headphones and listen it.
Yeah, it's a great deal. It's very affordable, so please do that because it's a wonderful conference, and that's why we want to be a part of sponsoring it.
It's really important now that we have these virtual options. Are really important for building community within the state and for extending the reach of the conference to neighbor island communities.
Yeah. Well, one last thing, and we've already kind of touched upon it, but I didn't know if you'd like to share a little bit more, with, again, the increase in the interest rates. I'm really worried about the impact on home rebuilding and business rebuilding. And one of the things in particular I'm concerned about is as we've seen with money coming in for insurance now without the ability to rebuild as we remediate the land, I'm worried also not only about the interest rate increases, but what happens to that money when it's sitting in an account for a period of time. And we've seen when people apply for housing, they pre-qualify, they go through training, they're ready to go at that time, and then years later, while they're waiting on the list, they make other financial decisions that can really impact their abilities to buy that home. So how do you see this playing out over the next few years?
Well, first of all, just reality check. There's an old surfing expression, dude, you should have been here yesterday. You know what I mean? It's like the surf was better yesterday. The last 10 years, I hate to tell you, if you didn't get into a house in the last 10 years, you missed a window of affordability that is among the best and was certainly the longest that existed for the last 40 years. I only have 40 years of data, but I can tell you that the last 10 years, until about a year and a half ago, were the best, most affordable housing window in Hawaii of the last 40. And now I know you've been hearing from everybody that it's a housing crisis. And I kept telling people, don't say it's a housing crisis. Don't discourage people. You will never find a better moment to get into a house. Housing is never going to be cheap in Hawaii. But you got to grab it when the interest rate is low. Well, that was, a 3% mortgage rate a year and a half ago, and today it's over 7%. And realistically, even when monetary policy gets back to normal, it's going to be more like a 5% interest rate. But hey, that's normal. What happened the last 10 years was the exception, not the rule. It's just a fact that half the people in Hawaii today, anybody under the age of 40, has never lived in a time when interest rates increased as much as they did in the last 18 months. That's just a fact. 5.5 percentage point increase in the overnight rate, 4.5 percentage point increase in the 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate. That has never happened in the lives of half the people in Hawaii. So deal with it. That's the reality. And it may take you longer to get into the house you wanted, but it's still not a bad long-term financial or wealth accumulation strategy, and you get to live in the house. Let me give you a feel for what the forecast is from a conference of the National Association for Business Economics. And this is, what's today, Tuesday? This is from Sunday. So they posted the report yesterday. I'll give you an idea of what the panel of the National Association forecast for the overnight rate this year, next year, and in 2025 and 2026. So they see rates at the overnight point going from 5.25 to about 4.5 to about 3.5 to about 2.5% by 2026. If you look at the moderator of the panel, was a guy from S&P Insights, his forecast was 5.6% this year, 4.9% next year, 3.9% in 2025, and 2.9% in 2026. So if the overnight rate goes from 5.5 today to 2.5 to 3% in 4 years, then the risk-free rate, the 10-year yield on the should go from about, just add 200 basis points. So call that, right now it's inverted. So from 4.5 now to say 3.5 in the next 4 years when the yield curve normalizes, and then add, let's say, a 200 basis point premium to get the mortgage rate, which is going to be 5.5. So it's 7.5% now, let's say. Over the next several years, it should subside to about 5.5, let's say, by mid-decade sometime. Make a plan. To get in when the window of opportunity reopens. It's going to be very tough in the near term, but it's a long-term investment. It's for the rest of your life in one way or another. So plan ahead and plan accordingly.
Well, that is very well said. And, we're all going to have to get very serious about planning ahead, and particularly in the arena of housing. So thank you so much, Paul. As always, you are a treasure trove of information, and we love having you on the show. Paul has sent us some information with resources that we will post on the Chamber's website at mauichamber.com soon, hopefully later today or tomorrow morning. And just really appreciate having you on, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday.
See you then, Pam.
All right.
Thanks for
a million.
The invitation.
Take care. Aloha. All right, we're going to take a quick message from our sponsor, Mokulele Airlines, and be right back with Debbie Cabebe of MEO.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
I wanted to introduce Debbie. Many of you know and love Debbie. She is the CEO of Maui Economic Opportunity, and as the Chief Executive Officer for that organization, she leads one of the largest nonprofit organizations in Maui County with a $22 million annual budget, more than 200 employees on Maui, Molokai, and Lanai, and more than 40 programs to help low-income residents, persons with disabilities, kapuna, youth, and other disenfranchised members of the community. MEO is also one of the largest established nonprofits in the county, chartered in 1965. She became CEO in April 2017, ascending through the ranks in her 23-year career with the Community Action Agency, part of a national network of poverty-fighting agencies. She began with MEO as their Chief Human Resource Officer in 2000 and became Chief Operating Officer in 2011. So she has served for a long time. She also serves on many boards and commissions, including the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, the Friends of the Children's Justice Center, Association of Farm Workers Opportunity Program, Rocky Mountain High, where she's the treasurer, Community Transportation Association of America, she's our state delegate, and Workforce Investment Board, along with the Maui County Council on Aging and the Nonprofit Directors Association. So you can bet she is a very busy woman and does so much for our community. Gary, is Debbie on?
Yes. Hi. Good morning, Pam.
Hey, good morning, Debbie. Thank you so much for all you do and are currently doing. I know you've got a lot of programs and assistance that you're providing to the victims of the Lahaina and Kula wildfires right now.
Yes, we are very, very, very busy.
I can only imagine, with so much need. Tell us a little bit about some of the assistance that's available to everybody.
Well, immediately we have some rental assistance available. We receive private funding from donations and then also a grant through Hawaii Community Foundation. So we were helping with the Hawaii Community Foundation, we were helping individuals that were directly impacted by the fires. So people who lost their homes or had to move because of the fires.
Yes.
And then with our private funding, we were assisting those individuals that were indirectly impacted, those who maybe had their hours cut or lost their jobs, but they didn't lose their homes. The private funding has been completely exhausted, so we are out of funds for that right now. But we do have money still available for through Hawaii Community Foundation to help individuals who are directly impacted. And so what they would need to do is find a unit for 6 months or longer, and then send us a copy of the lease and a photo ID, have a simple little application to fill out, and then we can pay for the deposit and up to 6 months rent. And during that time, we try to help them stabilize so that by the end of 6 months they can either retain that unit or move into something, a little bit longer term.
How is that going, given, our housing issues? How are people able to find something for that period of time?
Well, right now we still have more people waiting for units than we have units available. So some of the realtors, some of the property owners of short-term rentals have been very gracious and converted their rentals into, 6-month rentals to assist those in need. We are competing with the FEMA assistance because FEMA is paying up to 18 months of assistance. So we do ask people to apply for FEMA first, and then if they don't qualify for FEMA, then come to us, because FEMA could possibly give them a little bit longer stay, and I believe that they can pay a little bit higher rate. So that's been really the biggest challenge is, as you well know, is just there aren't enough units even before the fires.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but I'm also glad to know, as you point out, that there are some people who didn't qualify through FEMA. So I'm glad that they have that resource through you, because, again, they were directly impacted by the fires. If they don't meet that qualification for the longer funding, that you've still got funding available to help. That's huge.
We do, and as soon as we identify an available unit, we match people up pretty quick. But the fastest way is if you can find your own unit and come to us, then we can get you support very quickly. I mean, turnaround is within a couple of days usually. And then we follow up. We're following up with the folks that we've been helping. We do monthly check-ins to see where they're at, and if there's something else we can do to help them stabilize.
Nice. Yeah, that's really important during this time.
It is very important. And then we have a couple of programs that we will be starting very shortly through the state. One is through the Department of Labor, and one is through the Department of Human Services. So one is a financial assistance for families. And I can't give a lot of details yet. There's going to be an announcement coming out very soon, and that will be starting on October 20th, and that'll be online. We'll also have people can walk in and apply, and then we'll be conducting outreach, and it's significant assistance for families with children. And then the other program is through the Department of Labor, and it's a dislocated workers grant. And that will be enrolling people in this humanitarian aid program where they are performing. Many of them are already doing the work on a voluntary basis, but they'll be able to get paid. The salaries for the different positions vary, but the minimum somebody would earn is $20.50 an hour.
Great.
And while they're training, they're doing humanitarian work, they're getting paid, they get statutory benefits, and they're eligible for, some supportive services as well, and hopefully we can get them into a long-term employment at the end of that. And that's going to help about 300 individuals over a 2-year period.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
So that's going to be a huge undertaking. We're ramping up, but we're very excited about it. And then we have been working with our immigration population, particularly the Hispanic Latinos folks, and we've hosted several consulates here. So initially consulates came and helped people with document restoration, so people that lost their documents during the fires. And then this Saturday we have the Mexican consulate visiting, and they will be helping people to actually get documents. So it could be some new documents.
Oh, that's going to be spectacular.
So they'll help people with passports, birth certificates, IDs, and then voter registration as well. And there's a couple of ways folks can sign up for that. They do have to pre-register, so they can't just walk in, but they can call 1-424-309-0009, or they can go to the consulate website, which is miconsulado.sre.gov.mx, or they can call MEO and speak with one of our staff in our Enlace Hispano program to help walk them through that, because that's a lot of information for somebody to remember. But our Enlace number is 808-243-4354. That's 808-243-4354.
And then, Debbie, can you send
and
us
that's
that
this
other
Saturday
information?
from 8 to 4 p.m. here at in Mahalani Street in Wailuku.
8 to 4 p.m. in Mahalani Street, which is awesome. Can you send me that call-in number and that website?
Yes.
And
the
we
call-in
will
number
post that.
is 1-424-309-0009. And the website, which is the best way to register, is at MICONSULAZO.SRE.gov.mx.
Okay, I'm gonna. Let's also post it too, because some of it is it's hard to hear if it's an S as in Sam or F as in Frank, and so. But we'll make sure that we get that up if you didn't fully get that.
To you.
The phone number, I think, if you heard it correctly, go ahead and register online, because that would be easier. But if you're not sure, also you've got the phone number, which will be a tremendous help. And then that's this Saturday from 8 to 4 p.m.
That is this Saturday, and we're expecting a large crowd. The Mexican consulate has been very proactive in reaching out to us and really wanting to support the community.
All right, 1 minute left.
Oh, thank you. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for sharing these resources with us. We'll post some the information on the Chamber website at MauiChamber.com. Really appreciate having you on, Debbie, and wish you a great day. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for joining us every Tuesday morning. We hope you got a lot out of this show. Please share the resources and the things that you've learned with others today. And join us again next Tuesday. Blessings and aloha.